Now that we understand the basics of arrays, let me show you how we commonly use more elements of the loop that we just left off with. So look at this. Remember learning last week about the length of the amount of characters? There's also a length field which counts the number of elements in an array. And that length is pretty simple. For example, if your array is int sub 5, you have 5 elements, the length's going to be 5 too. So it's not real tough to figure out. So a lot of times you might use this field to use it right here. Let's look at this length field. So in a for loop, we could say we're starting at 0. And we're going to keep adding 1 as the increment, but we're going to keep on going until we're still less than the largest length of the array. So let's say the array is 5. So that means you have elements 0 through 4. So this will go sub 1 and do what we just did in that last video. We'd add 3, so we got the 3, and then we come back and do the 6 to get the 9, the 12 by adding 3 each time. But when we get to when sub is 4, and we've just printed out the 4th element, we'd come up here, and 4 is still less than the array length is 5, so it would do it the 4th time. But when it comes up to 5, well, 5 is not less than the length of the array, which is 5. So we'll see this statement right here quite a bit. That way, regardless of how much larger I make the array as our company maybe grows with the number of people and we keep upping the array, then I don't have to keep changing the top end of my loop. You also might make a for loop. Instead of a for loop, you may have a while loop that keeps on going until, keep filling up an array until the user says, well, I don't have any more people, even though your array is bigger. So they might enter a ZZZ, or you might tell them what number stops this or what string stops this. So let me now take you into our program environment here. So what we're going to do is fill up the codes again like we have been doing. But this time around, I'm going to show you some clever ways to use the loop. So once again, we're using an array. We know it's a literal array. We know how many values are going to be in here. We're populating it right now, 24, 36, 48, 51, 62. So it makes an array called codes from sub 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we're ever asked, the length of codes, the array is 5 elements. So important to the story here. We don't know what X is yet. And it first is going to print out the word forwards. So counting the numbers as they were populated into the array originally. So this for loop right here is going to start at 0. So there's the X is 0. And we're going to go 0 is less than codes.length. We told you the codes.length is 5 elements. So it's like saying, well, X is less than 5. So it's going to print codes sub 0. It's going to print 24. Come back up because it does not have braces. It must be a single statement for loop. And now it's 1, and 1 is less than 5, so it prints code sub 1, 36. Comes back up because of the increments, X is now 2. 2 is less than 5, so it prints code sub 2, which is 48. Comes back up, X is now 3. 3 is less than 5, it prints code sub 3, which is 51. It comes back up, now X is 4. 4 is less than 5, so the last thing it prints is code sub 4, which is 62. Comes back up, now X is 5. 5 is not less than 5. So now, if you look at the printout down here, printing them forwards, printed them in the order they were given, but now here's the interesting part. We can use this to go backwards as well. Look at line 10. It's going to print out the word backwards on a new line. And now, oh, look at this. It's going to start with, it's telling you x is equal to the code's length minus 1. Now let's think this through. Why do we need to subtract 1? Well, code's length, this part right here, we know there are 5 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements, so the length is 5. But if you started at 5 and tried to print code sub 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, there is no code sub 5. I'm hoping you're thinking subscript out of range, so that would not work. So we've got to subtract 1 from it, and that's what we do here. So it's starting the loop at 4, printing code sub 4, which is the last item, 62, putting the space, coming back up. Now, because of the decrement, that means subtract 1. It was 4, now it's 3, so it prints code sub 3, which is the 51. Comes back up, it prints code sub 2, 48, code sub 1, 36, and let's see how it gets to 0. We finally come up and now it's 0, so but x0 is still greater than or equal to 0, so it does do code sub 0, printing this 24, but it becomes negative 1, comes back up, and negative 1 is not greater than or equal to 0, so it shuts down the loop, stopping it. So it's a nice way to use code's length to finish the going forward and even going backward. But don't forget, be careful to make sure you subtract the 1. If I were to take this out of my program, let me go ahead and show you, we're going to get an error here. In fact, it did the forwards, but it's showing you index out of bounds. The array is out of bounds. And what does it go wrong? Line 12. And you say, why at line 12? I thought this was the problem. This isn't the trouble. It's when it tries to print code sub 5, and there is no code sub 5, that we throw an error there. So pretty cool. So let me put together a quick weather with strings. So here's what this code is going to do right here. I am going to ask the user to enter 5 different weather conditions like rain and sun and hail and windy and hot, cold, anything, right? And then we'll just show them a little bit later on. And so let me show you how to do strings. I have declared a string that holds 5 elements. It will have indexes or subscripts from 0 to 4. It's called weather. That's the name of my array. I'm also going to assign I to 0. You'll see why. I wanted to pop back in a while loop. I didn't want to just show for loops. So in this case, while I is less than weather.length. So in other words, while it's less than 5, it's going to keep going, and right now it's 0. And if you remember, this is a top controlled loop because the condition's at the top. If this wouldn't have been true, I would have never entered this loop. So this is true, so I enter in, and I'm going to ask the person, please enter the weather condition. And whatever they type in, I'm going to assign to the array weather, in this case, sub I, and that's sub 0. So I now have 1 element in my array, and I came down here and I typed in the word sun or sunny. So weather sub 0 is sun. I increment by 1, if not, the loop will never end. You'll be in an infinite loop if you remember from the last couple chapters. Comes back around, now I is 1. Is 1 less than 5? Sure. So now I put in the second weather condition. And now weather sub 1, in my case, is going to be rain. Now I is incremented up to 2. Is 2 less than 5? Nope. Oh, yes, it is. 2 is less than 5. We haven't gotten to 5 yet. So we're going to say, please enter another weather condition. Now weather sub 2 is going to be snow. Now I is up to 3. And in fact, it's going to ask me for a total of 5 different weather conditions, hail and wind. And then when finally I gets up to 5, 5 is not less than 5, so it shuts down out of this loop. Now it's going to come down and print out the weather conditions are. I'm now just switching my loop control variable to J. And now I'm going to say, while J is less than 5, the weather length. And now it's just going to go grab things out of our array. So if we scroll down, it's going to print out space, weather 0. So whatever's in weather 0, if you remember, I believe that was sun. So now it's going to print the weather conditions are sun, rain, snow, hail, wind, because it's going back into that array and grabbing that information out. I could have made it go the opposite direction if I would have had weather length, greater than J. So you can do lots of different things. You could even have, if I would have typed in some secret code like not sunny, I could have had if I is equal to not sunny, it'll keep on going until you put in the secret code to make it stop. So there's all different ways you could run this. If I wanted to now allow 20 different types of weather, I could just switch that to 20. And now I am ready to roll. You could also have the user input this value 20 very early on. You could say, how many types of weather do you want to type in? X. And we could have this as a variable as well. So lots of different things we can do with arrays so far. One other item that's really common as you begin and learn arrays is once all the values are in an array, how do you search it? Like in the last case, we had filled it with rain and sun and so forth. But if we were looking to see if the weather that someone else types in is a valid type of weather, we may want to look through that array. So what we can do, this for loop is going to go from the beginning of the array with index of 0 or subscript of 0 and keep on going until it gets to the last element of the array. So we don't know how big this is from just looking at this piece of code, but this would work regardless of how big your array is. And we may have already asked in the statement before this, what item have you ordered? So we already have this string called item ordered. We are looking to see if what you bought is sold at our store. So let's say we're talking a outdoor store like Dick's at the mall, and we're seeing if they sell hiking boots. So that's the item you ordered. Is that available? So this if statement would say if the hiking boots, don't forget the reason for the two equal signs, we're comparing it, not assigning it. It's going to first look at valid value sub 0. This is our array name in this case. So let's say the very first thing in valid values sub 0 that the sporting goods store is backpacks. So valid values sub 0 is backpacks. Well, that's not equal to the item that we just ordered. So is valid item does not become true. So we come back around again. We go to now valid values sub 1. And maybe it's not looking at hiking boots yet, but value sub 1 is something like a sleeping bag. Well, that's not the right thing. So this doesn't happen because it's not true. So this could actually look through millions and millions of items that an inventory of a store to see if item ordered is here. So after this loop, we would simply say, if is valid item is true, then we can say we found the order. Otherwise, we can say we don't carry that item. So something like this is why arrays are so powerful, because if we didn't have arrays, we would have to have a separate variable. You'd have to have a variable called suitcases, book bags, all these different variables. And I don't know how you would even look through all of them. You'd have to have thousands of if statements as if item ordered is not a backpack. So this allows us to look through a very large structure of data. It could be 10 pieces in the array or 10 million in the array, and this would still work. So that's what makes arrays so powerful.